Dr. Anirban Ganguly, Ambassador Sikri, Professor Vaidyanathan, Sri Prabhat Kumar, and ladies and gentlemen. I am delighted and honored that Anirban has saw fit to invite me to release this book. I have never seen this room this full for a very, very long time. So that sort of signifies the credibility that Prabhat Prakashan, Anirban Ganguly, and the Shyama Prasad Mukherjee Foundation together have. Before I move on to the few limited points I want to make, in case you are wondering about who has been doing that kite flying about mudra, that is Hindol Sengupta, who also mentions it in his book. He's there at the back tweeting away. These days, whenever nothing happens in Delhi, it is blamed on LG. I'm not talking about the Delhi government. I'm talking about the union government in Delhi. If there is problem with the land legislation, L, if there is a problem with GST, G, then nothing else is happening. But there is plenty more that is going on. And I think Prabhat Prakashan and Dr. Anirban Ganguly need to be complimented and congratulated for having brought this compilation together. Not very long ago, 1 year of this government was over, and all kinds of commentators began to evaluate the Modi government, as they did after the first 100 days. To the best of my knowledge, the Prime Minister, even in the course of campaigning before he became Prime Minister, has never said, I will do all that is to be done in the first 100 days. To the best of my knowledge, he has not said he will do all that he has to do within 1 year. So these are self-proclaimed benchmarks and yardsticks, externally determined, so that if there is a problem with the land legislation, if there is a problem with GST, if there is a problem with Chapter 5B of the Industrial Disputes Act, not that it is on the agenda, then the reforms are not happening. Now that's very strange. I want to quickly list out some of the changes which to my mind have been very, very significant. Some of those are inadequately covered in this book still. So therefore, while I endorse the book, while I recommend that you read the book, I also want to highlight the fact that to my mind, some of the most significant changes which I will enumerate for you in a moment have not yet been adequately covered. By the way, Ambassador Sikri, recently I was at an event in Calcutta where Babul Supriyo said he objected to the Prime Minister being referred to as PM because it suggests he works only in the afternoon. So he persistently referred to Narendra Modi as AM PM. I am sorry to say that this being an event in Calcutta, friends of Professor Vaidyanathan were around, so he got no applause whatsoever. But let me quickly list out some of the things which illustrate that it is not just about niyat, it is also about niti. And when I say it's about niti, I'm not talking about Niti Ayog, although that is also there. first let me flag what to my mind is the most significant change that has happened. And it is a change that is still not being appreciated. It is a change that is still not being digested because we have got used to more than 6 decades of a mindset that is different. And what is this change? That change tangentially also affects Niti Aayog. So let me start with Niti Aayog. Quite often I meet people and they ask me, what is Niti planning to do for India? What is Niti planning to do for the states? And I say, why should we decide? Let the states decide. And it is almost as if I am talking to a brick wall because it does not register. One of the most interesting things and important things that has happened is a complete change in the institutional mechanism, and that has happened through several different ways, which let me now list out. The first one is, of course, the happy coincidence of the 14th Finance Commission recommendations, which have meant that 42% of the divisible pool of resources are now going as untied funds to the states, and in addition, about rupees 450 per capita per year is going to the panchayats. Technically, there's more that's actually going, at least in this year's budget, is more than 60%, but let me ignore that. There used to be a bunch of centrally sponsored schemes, central sector schemes, with very, very rigid templates devised in Delhi, devised generally in the building that I occupy, which of course has a different name now. And one of the most significant things that has happened is there are 3 subgroups of chief ministers, which have been set up to determine what should be the shape of these public expenditure schemes in the form of the centrally sponsored schemes, in the form of the Swachh Bharat mission, in the form of skills development. So it is not the PM who is deciding. It's not the PMO which is deciding. It is not 7RCR which is deciding. It's not Block which is deciding. It is not Yojana Bhavan which is deciding. It is the chief ministers who are deciding. This morning I was at an event where there was a discussion about smart cities. And constantly I am asked the question, what is the smartness about these smart cities? We don't understand. How much of money is the government going to spend? How were these cities decided? How were they chosen? Well, the cities were not really chosen by the Ministry of Urban Development. They were chosen by the states themselves. The smartness does not come about from the X amount of money that the union government and state governments together are going to spend. The smartness is for we as citizens to decide and figure out. It is for us as citizens to devise plans. Let me link this up. Quickly, let me mention the Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana, which now also has insurance products. I will not dwell on that because that's been covered and mentioned in the book. But let me also mention the SECC, which is there in the public domain, at least for the rural sector. For years and years, since 1991, we have gone round and round in circles, trying to define which part of the population is BPL, below the poverty line. And we have never succeeded because the poverty line was determined in the Planning Commission on the basis of data churned out by the NSS, which is a survey, it is not a census. On the basis of a survey, You will never be able to determine whether a particular household is poor or is not poor. That can only be done through decentralized identification. You will not believe me, so please go back and check. Check the President's address to Parliament in 2004. I think it was the month of May, it could have been June. It was June, I think. Check the President's address to Parliament in June 2004. June 2004. Check paragraph 38. Paragraph 38 listed out the various things that UPA 1 was going to do in the first 100 days. And in that list of what was supposed to be done in the first 100 days in paragraph 38, you would have found decentralized identification of the poor through Gram Sabhas. But no one reports this, that this was promised. It was not done. It's now being done through the SECC. And the standard accusation is, what's great about this? This is a continuation, it is a legacy of UPA, in a sense it was. But it's a legacy that the UPA never implemented, which is now being done. Look at the land legislation. Where is land? One of my friends, whom I shall not name, who was a pioneer in pushing through the land bill, consistently lies. He says that land is in the concurrent list in the 7th schedule. Go look it up. It isn't. It is in the state list. If it is in the state list, in terms of the spirit of the 7th schedule, we should have never had that union piece of legislation. It doesn't violate the law. I'm not making that point, because it's justified under entry 6 on acquisition of property. But purely in terms of the spirit of the Constitution, that 2013 piece of law should never have been enacted. And what is happening now is indeed desirable. That let the states do what they want. Is the value of land in the barren tracts of Rajasthan the same as the value of land in the national capital region? So why should I have a centralized template? Look at the GST. Why is there this 1%, which is a temporary one? I presume everyone knows about this 1%. Is because some of the producing states want it. It's not something that North Bloc has decided. How can anyone in senses say that the maximum GST rate should be 18%? Who has the right to decide that? The GST Council has the right to decide that. I've given you all of these examples to drive home the point that the most significant change that I think has happened, and all of these are elements of that, is the decentralization, the devolution, the empowering, the conscious moving away from determination and decision making in Delhi. Down the years, India has become extremely centralized. And this decentralization, this devolution, which has just begun, I think is extremely, extremely important. Let me mention 2 or 3 other things. In the course of the campaign, the Prime Minister, he was not the Prime Minister then, but the Prime Minister remarked that he was going to repeal old laws. How many of you are aware that a large number of old laws, almost 300, have already been repealed? How many of you are aware that there is a bill pending to repeal another 300 odd? Why are you not aware? It is not secret information. It is public domain information that is there on the Ministry of Law's website. The reason you are not aware is because lazy journalists will not take the trouble to go and read up. Just as lazy journalists will not bother to go and read up the concept note on smart cities and will therefore say, we don't understand what is smart. Let me now also mention the doing business indicators. By the doing business indicators, I am not only talking about DIPP and what DIPP has attempted to do in terms of making business easier in the states. That's part of it. But is there a listing anywhere of the simplification that has been done of the union government laws? You will not find such a ready listing. You will not find it in the newspapers. You will not find it, I'm sorry to say, even in this book. And the fact that many of the state governments have simplified their labor laws is due to the fact that that trigger came about from DIPP. I don't want to take a great deal of your time. I just illustrated some instances to indicate how changes have happened. Unfortunately, as I said, the Prime Minister never promised a magic wand and said that I will solve everything overnight. And part of the problem is also that there is no magic wand and expectations are extremely high out of all proportion to whatever the delivery might be. But let me mention a commentator whose name I shall not mention. He's widely read. Recently he wrote a piece which said, with reference to the land bill, that Modi does not have courage. Modi should do this, Modi should do that. In the course of the campaigns, he also wrote several pieces saying Modi should do this, Modi should do that. He also wrote several pieces saying that if Modi does not do this, if Modi does not do that, the BJP will not cross 180 seats and the NDA will not cross 200 seats. I'm delighted, I'm extremely thankful that Mr. Modi did not listen to such commentators. Had he listened, I don't think we would have had this government today. And I'm delighted that no one is paying, I think, the slightest bit of attention to national media, which is described as the media that is read and watched between Noida on one side and Gurgaon on the other. There's a rest of India, and the change and the reforms, the improvements in governance, the growth rates, the employment generation, the skill development, the environmental protection, it is about that India. The blinkered lenses of commentators don't really matter. As for the so-called foreign investors, as for the so-called rating agencies, I think they know and are much more sensible than the domestic commentators are. They realize there is a democratic process. They realize that legislation has to wind its way through Parliament. They recognize that there is a federal structure in the Constitution. They recognize that the government that has come into being is a government in Delhi. They recognize that Make in India is not going to happen in Delhi, it's going to happen in the states. They are not naive. They have factored all of that in. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again. Let me congratulate Anirban, and for God's sake, don't wait for another 3 years to bring out another version. You need to constantly educate people and tell them that there are priorities that are different from the priorities of some of those commentators. Thank you very much.